Hi, welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I'm Caroline Hill. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Ari.
Ari Kaplan. I am an analyst that covers the legal industry, and gosh, it's such a privilege to have this conversation with you, Caroline. Thank you.
Privileged to have a conversation with you,
Yeah,
Ari. How are you? What's going on?
I'm well. I'm just coming off the heels of Thanksgiving, and feel like there's much to be grateful for. And
Oh,
so, yes, I feel, especially our discussions. I mean, we've been on a regular cadence doing this for it's almost 2 years.
man, isn't it? It's always such a pleasure. And
Amazing,
Ari is always just such an
amazing.
inspiration. Ari was just talking about Thanksgiving. We always end up talking about a lot of legal tech and then also not a lot of legal tech, which is great. I love that combination. But Ari was just talking about being thankful over Thanksgiving. And with you, those kind of conversations are very natural for me. Like talking about encouraging your children to be genuinely thankful. And I love that. I love that about our conversations.
Yeah. Well, I just think that we speak a lot about gratitude, but we don't live gratefully. And I think that that's a powerful component. And I feel like our space is starting to see I don't know, the fruits of that gratitude in some ways. I think that you're this has been an incredible period in legal all over the world. I know that you're involved in several things in the UK and in continental Europe, and I'm looking forward to thinking about what's to come. I've been in a sort of an interesting planning mode. You're probably doing the same thing,
Mm.
but have been trying to be more strategic about setting, being intentional about any trip that I take, any event that I speak at to try to maximize the value. And I think that there's a real theme there, just in terms of how can we take greater advantage of what we're doing and also the market. I noticed that a lot of companies, I read your newsletter very closely and I read your coverage of what's happening. And I notice companies are, even those that are quite dominant in the market, are finding ways to provide incremental value or to reach a slightly broader audience with what they're offering. And I get the sense that that theme is going to continue throughout the new year.
Think it's going to be a fascinating new year. Like I've been doing some end of year interviews with some senior leaders. I'm sure you've been talking to people as well. And to looking back firstly at 2024 and what an incredible year it's been. I think maybe we'll do that next time, do a sort of year end gaze back. But it's just it's kept everybody on their toes. That is for sure. The pace of change has been incredible. But I think people feel like there's change, not just obviously there's been a lot of change. There's Gen AI, there's stuff we've talked about 1,000 times, but they really feel like the market is on the cusp of having, things being really different, of vendors being challenged, of new entrants. Obviously, people are looking very closely at Microsoft, and all sorts of things. People feel the people I've been speaking to feel like that we're sort of on the cusp of really fundamental change within the sector, which is just fascinating.
Uh, Not only, I feel like not only are people appreciating the generally positive nature of this past year from a business standpoint and in legal and a developmental standpoint, I do get the sense that fear of generative AI and of change and of expansive technology penetration is being converted into some sort of a proactive momentum forward. I get the sense that people, instead of waiting to see how these tools might affect their careers, their practices, the trajectory of their work, they are increasingly experimenting, deploying whatever available capital to try to pilot. They are really investing time and effort in training in ways that historically they may not have because they were so busy. But I do get the sense that people are making time, even if it might be on their own time, because they recognize that you either position yourself for success or you may have to react to the opposite. And I've always, I wrote a book called The Opportunity Maker. And a book called Reinventing Professional Services. So I've been like deeply thinking about this for a very long time. And I just think that waiting for something to happen is just not as good a position as anticipating that something will happen in whatever direction. You may be wrong about the end result, but the idea that the ground is shifting is a certainty. And people who are preparing a little bit better and anticipating that they will need to move regardless of what that looks like. I mean, for example, I don't know if you've ever done this, but sometimes at a conference, I feel like I've been at events and someone will say, I think I was at maybe it was an Association of Legal Administrators conference, and someone either suggested in our panel or someone did an exercise where they simply said, "Okay, everybody stand up and move, one seat over." And people were really bothered by that slight shift in their positioning. They did not like it. And they were like, "Well, now imagine your entire project management suite or practice portfolio was changed even just slightly, like moving the button on an interface." And it was just sort of it was very interesting. But I feel like people are now like, you know what? I'm going to move to the next table. And I feel like that visual is where we're headed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think feel like this was the year. So 23, the year of well, probably blind panic. 24, the year of experimentation. Still blind some panic in the beginning, and depending on the size of firm, I think that this is quite fascinating. If you're talking about the private practice sector, I still think that there's a there's a perhaps a growing gap as well between the firms that really are starting to move ahead and those that aren't. Think it's quite a scary time for some people. But and then the ones that are, this has been a year of them sort of, I think people are, the word sandbox probably wasn't used enough in legal, like we weren't really a sandbox kind of industry. Like we're more of a create it, buy it, and they will come and inflict it on them, and whether it's usable or not, or all this kind of traditional stuff. But actually, now I hear the word sandbox quite a lot in the context of work that corporates and law firms are doing together, which is great to see, like so I spoke to a global head of legal operations who was saying that 24 has been a year of the sandbox of POCs with private practice firms. That and that doesn't necessarily translate to these things have been rolled out. Right. This is the other thing, that they've been learning, they've been experimenting, they've been doing some playing in the sandbox, which I think is great to see. Like we've been quite behind in that. I think I remember chairing a panel once years ago at a big tech conference, a mainstream tech conference, and it was about agile and about design thinking with some banks. I can't remember how I got involved in that, to be honest with you. It's one of those things. I wasn't involved with banks. I don't know. I think I just said yes, which, as you know, is the thing of mine. They just said, "Do you want to speak on the panel?" I'm like, "Yeah." Oh, what is it? What? Anyway, I've seen us now catching up mentally with some of the way the banks have operated with tech and that sort of agile thinking, which is great to see.
Certainly, we've moved from fear to fascination now to some practical exercises. And I keep open on my browser a window for a generative AI tool because I'm trying to, the only way to figure out what the use cases are is to have a task and then have this tool available and then see if this will work. And it has been really helpful. Again, I don't really use it to actually generate original content. Usually I ask it to sort of organize things or find things within particular designated types of content. And I get the sense that people are the safest way for those organizations to use it is to make sure they're having defined parameters around it. But I also think that people are just being more strategic. They're planning and they're recognizing, but there seems like there's a broader volume of momentum kind of taking place. It's not just generative AI, although that has been the impetus. It's much more about figuring out where does automation fit into your workflow and what's inefficient and how can you provide service in a way that's more responsive. We're sort of getting back to fundamentals, by pushing forward with advancements. And I think that that is also likely to be a pretty interesting trend as people reassess and reevaluate. We were just talking about every time you purchase a new gadget, it seems like you have to upgrade your operating system and your computer and the entire infrastructure. And I think that, we're starting to see this idea of keeping your data house and your infrastructure as clean as possible to make that easier. Just the addition of any new tool or technology. I think that,
So true.
that's
So
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
exactly resonates with the conversations I've been having. Like we talked about data for 1,000 years, but I think it's really brought it home now, the need to really work on your data, and people that have perhaps shot ahead with proof of concepts. Or I think actually I think that's an interesting point, that you need to have your house in order, whether that be data, whether that be the fact that you've got policies, whether you've got, you need your building blocks in place. The conversations I've been having are we've kind of worked out where the gaps are. Data is definitely often one of those, or it might be that we just don't have a clear enough process or policy in place, so that when we've shot ahead with a proof of concept because everyone's got really excited about something, we then realize that either we've got the potential to lose control of it, or else it just doesn't work, or there's risks or whatever, because they haven't got the building blocks in place. I think it's going to be 2020. This second half of the year is a moment of realization on that front as well. Gosh, we really have to focus on data. We really have to have good policies, processes, lockdown, governance, um, ways of working, all of that kind of stuff. And then it makes people freer, right? Then you can within those guardrails go knock yourselves out, have some fun.
Right. And I'm so glad that you and I are both trying to engage in these conversations for the end of the year. I look forward to your video series. I'm hosting one of my CEO roundtables. I do a year-end CEO roundtable. So I'll have CEOs from a number of legal tech and legal services companies and looking forward to their perspectives. And I'm hosting my last legal tech mafia breakfast in Manhattan of the year. And I know you're going to the European Legal Technology Association conference in
Yep.
Paris.
I am. I can't. I'm just for a day in Paris at Christmas, and I'm just going to be inside a conference. But anyway, that's what happens when you have children. But it's going to be amazing. So we're going to go. Yeah, it's the European Legal Technology Association conference in Paris, and I'm on a panel. We're talking about how law firms are using AI. Of course, it's going to be AI, but I'm really grateful to be asked. It's always such a, like you use the word privilege. It's a privilege to be there. I'm really grateful to ELTA, which seems to be developing momentum. Obviously you've got ILTACON, and that's huge in the US, not quite small in the UK. But in terms, and some of the European law firms come over. You've obviously got Lexpo in Amsterdam, which is Rob's event that you speak at, which is always
An
great to see
amazing
the
event, which I highly
amazing
recommend, which is going to
event,
be in June
amazing.
this year in 2025. And I will give you one piece of advice I'd love to share with you before
Yeah.
we go in your trip to Paris. So I was at Paris in February. And my one rule, well, not one rule, I suggested to my wife that we do one thing when we're in Paris, which is anytime you see a line of people waiting out a plate outside of a place to eat, just get on the line. You know, it's a bunch of people that found some amazing place on TikTok and that whatever that's going to be. So if it was a cheese shop, a bread shop, a pastry shop, no matter chocolate shop, no matter what it was, I was like, oh, she's like, we were just on this line. You got this, croissant wrapped in a cookie. I was like, I know, but I don't know what this store is, and I don't know what they're waiting for. So I guess it could go wrong in
That's
some
funny.
respect, but that's my
You realize
rule.
that lots of
And
people probably had the same theory as you, which is how the line developed, right?
that's
So they're like
yeah,
everyone
I
had the
get it.
same theory.
But I was in New York or in Paris, so I felt like it's okay. I get a pass on that one. Anyway, Caroline Hill, my friend, I'm as always honored to have this conversation with you. I'm looking forward to our last episode of the year
Yeah.
where we will recap trends, challenges, opportunities. And until then, I wish our listener, maybe I'll put a little S in parentheses at the end there, a wonderful afternoon. And I look forward to following up next time. Thanks so much.
Next time.